Tonight on Nation to Nation, we tour Kenora, Ontario to see how child welfare plays out on the streets.
I see a nation that's suffering, and I see it just being ignored, pretty much. Like there's a vicious cycle.
We also speak to a psychiatrist who treats clients in Kenora. He says the child welfare system spits them out right onto those mean streets.
They age out, often with no vocational skills, a lack of post-secondary education, a lack of money, a lack of direction, and often they've been traumatized.
A child welfare survivor says Kenora's problems are long-standing and chronic.
A lot of things are horribly wrong here. We're basically in a state of emergency, but the outside world doesn't know.
I'm Todd Lamirande, and welcome to Nation. We have a special show tonight, and it's all part of APTN putting the spotlight on the child welfare system over the next 2 weeks. But tonight, we zero in on Kenora, Ontario. It's where child welfare is being played out on the streets. The system feeds homeless shelters. It fills jails. If you peel back the layers, you'll find this over and over again. Nation to Nation producer Kenneth Jackson went to Kenora to put this all on the record. We begin with that story.
There's always a few sitting at this spot. You walk by them every day. Maybe try not to look them in the eyes. And there's more by the beer store. It's early in the morning and they're waiting for it to open. There's a child in each of them. Can you see it? One destroyed by the child welfare system that plays out on the streets of Kenora every day. And no one knows that more than this guy.
The impact of that. We're the ripple effect, so to say. So we're going to go to those places and get drunk, get high, do what everybody's doing just to cope, right? Because
Levan speaks from experience. He used to live on these streets. Jory Smith still does. Both took APTN around Kenora in September to show us how the child welfare system feeds the streets.
I see a nation that's suffering, and I see it just being ignored, pretty much. Like there's a vicious cycle. A lot of these youths who are just turning 18, they're no longer part of the system. They end up just carrying on.
As Smith speaks, a group of young guys walk by. He knows them from jail and foster care, especially the guy in black and yellow.
That one guy was sponsored by like DC, Crown Royal. He was a pro snowboarder, and
One of those guys right there?
Yeah, the guy in the yellow.
He's a pro snowboarder?
Pro snowboarder, and
you saw that phone and walking away?
He's a alcoholic now, And
we keep on our walk around Kenora. Signs of child welfare are everywhere. I asked him about the local jail.
This is going to be a perfect example. The jail is about 95% Aboriginal, but the staff is only 2% Aboriginal. So that kind of just paints a picture of the town, right? It's like an old boys club.
As we keep going, it's become clear racism is also at play here. So much so that City Council talked about passing an anti-loitering bylaw. And if you haven't guessed by now, most of the homeless people are First Nations.
I wouldn't say so much it was the mayor that called for that. I would say it's the people in this town, and that's where the racism still stays. Is the actual people in this town that believe so much into creating. Oh, it's such a nice city. It's such a nice town.
So we keep going on our walk of pretty Kenora. We stop near a farmer's market. Smith then explains how policing in the city changed a few years ago.
The difference I noticed between the Kenora police and OPP is the Kenora police might rough you up real good, but you might leave without getting charged. The OPP does everything according to plan, but then, there's ridiculous charges. And
then we hear some of that Kenora charm, as Smith explains how homeless people keep getting charged with minor offenses.
There's people that have been in the system for almost 10 years now because they keep getting that breach because they don't know any better than to just continue on with life, right? And that was someone who's probably ignorant.
Soon we meet another person. She knows the streets well. She also knows addiction.
My name is Miranda Elder. I'm from Kenora. I left for a while to Thunder Bay and Sault Ste. Marie, but I've lived here most of my life. And I have a different perspective on things because I went to school for social work and then became an IV drug user.
That means she knows who lives on the streets.
How do you see child welfare play out on the streets of Kenora?
I just see the same thing happening over and over again. I see families, like people are being placed with families that are worse by far than their actual family.
She estimates at least 3/4 of people on the street come from the child welfare system. We are near the end of our walk when we run into a group of people. I can spot the self-harming on the arm of the young girl in the middle. She's quiet and doesn't want to say much, so her friend does the talking.
It's not fair, man, because it's hard to find a place to live, right?
No, it's not fair. If you survive a child welfare system, you may end up here in Kenora with no place to go except the streets or jail.
Our first guest is someone you just saw. Craig Levan joins us from Kenora. Welcome to Nation, Mr. Levan.
Bonjour.
Now, you took Nation to Nation producer Kenneth Jackson around Kenora, and it seems the city really wishes it didn't have homeless people. What's going on there?
A lot of things are horribly wrong here. We're basically in a state of emergency, but the outside world doesn't know. We've been stuck like in this predicament, since the beginning of colonization. And this just persists to be an ongoing problem as we just brush the problems aside from residential school. I myself am a ripple effect from residential school. My mother was a survivor. She's passed away since, but towards the end of her life, she's explained to me what happened in her life, and that actually brought a lot of healing to my heart to actually begin my healing journey and find what I need to fix in society and in this town with just the system. I've been a product of the system, and now I'm actually making the right changes to the system.
In fact, you, as you say, you're making the right changes to the system. You work for an organization called Compassionate Kenora. So what is that, and what exactly do you do for them?
Well, Compassionate Kenora, we are an outreach clinic. Primarily, we have 2 days a week for clients. I am a chef, and I'm a peer support worker. And I've been actually running the evening shelter that we have a warming space between 5 and 9 because technically it's just overwhelming, I guess, for a population of 60 homeless people to be housed at one, I guess, location. With 50 organizations in this town, I find that very, very, very disappointing.
Since we were there in Kenora just a few months ago, things have changed quite a bit. I understand Compassionate Kenora just got an eviction notice and has to be out by New Year's. Why is that?
Well, it's the business sectors that are surrounding us. They believe that we do not belong on these streets, which is, very, very, very colonized. Right where these streets are, this is Rat Portage. This is my territory. This used to be my reservation. So now, if we're on these broken treaties, basically. These buildings shouldn't exist. So really, who should belong here is what the question is. So these businesses have actually voted us out because they think that we do not belong here. So they're brushing the problem to the side once again, just like the 1970s.
That seems to support our story that the city wishes didn't have homeless people there and that they just picked up, I guess, moved to Winnipeg.
Yeah, well, it's not just the homeless people. It's the race of the homeless people. We're 98% Aboriginal. And one of the facts is that I'd say 90% of us are baptized, so we're Christian. So I don't know how they differentiate us from being civilized or human.
Does the Ontario Provincial Police have anything to do with this?
Yes, they do. Just one officer came in here the other day and made my job very, very hard and made me want to almost quit to the point where it's almost like a bullying tactic to minimize the numbers in here and using COVID as a racism tactic.
As you said earlier on, one of the questions I asked, you were once in care. You've been You've described how you've been colonized and you've lived on the streets. You lived that life. It often means criminal charges. But you have fought to get here. What does that mean to you, considering the fight you still have to do?
Well, I find that I still have that warrior spirit in me. That that's something that I've always had coming into school, and being the bad kid. I actually went against everything that I've learned because I knew in my heart that it wasn't my religion, it wasn't my way of life. These weren't the numbers that I was supposed to be adding up, and these life skills that I was learning were not my life skills.
I suppose what's needed in Kenora? What does the city council need to learn from you and your organization?
Some compassion. We need to work together, and right now there's a lot of people actually waking up, and we're all going to be working together. Judge Gibson and Janine Seymour are they're doing a lot of great things, and I'm big supporters of what they're doing with the Kenora Justice Center, and I hope that in the future that we're all going to be working together and creating unity to help these people.
I suppose, having said that, how confident are you that the city will ever understand and come aboard?
It's going to be a process, just like anything else. Education is needed. We need to educate each other on both sides. Racism needs to stop. We just have to learn to coexist, is the big picture, and move forward. And
do you suppose more funding would also help, I suppose, from all kinds of levels of government, so that this problem, helps homeless people there in Kenora?
I think the funding is there. It's just the meetings need to stop. We need to actually do things. We need to get things done instead of having these meetings after meetings just to have another meeting. We need to actually do things, and that's something that I've been doing. I've been an action person.
Okay, Mr. Levan, I hope your action does bear some fruit, and I want to thank you for speaking to me.
You betcha.
Coming up, we speak to Dr. Bob King, a psychiatrist. He's very well acquainted with the human wreckage created by the child welfare system. Welcome back. You just saw how child welfare plays out on the streets of Kenora. The system feeds homelessness and the local jail. It's something that's happening in many cities. Our next guest knows all about this because he hears it from the people themselves. Dr. Bob King is a psychiatrist who's been treating clients in Kenora for the last couple of decades. Welcome to Nation, Dr. King.
Thanks so much, Todd. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy that APTN is focusing on issues that are dear to my heart.
That's great to hear from. But can you describe to us a bit about who your clients are and how many went through the child welfare system?
Yeah, I certainly can. I live in central Ontario, but I travel prior to the COVID pandemic to Kenora a week a month, and I consult to a community living agency called the Kenora Association for Community Living. So in the last 3 to 5 years, the majority of the clients that we have been seeing are transitional age youth between the age of 18 to 24. And the vast majority of those are Ojibwe with respect to their heritage. Many have been through the child and welfare system in Ontario. In other jobs that I've had, I've actually met them, either through group homes affiliated with Children's Aid Society or through private residential providers of care to children in care with the CAS in their jurisdiction. And then subsequently, I often meet them again in Kenora. They age out, often with no vocational skills, a lack of post-secondary education, a lack of money, a lack of direction, and often they've been traumatized, unfortunately, in the foster home settings that they've been supported in. And when they return to Kenora in the context of a crystal methamphetamine epidemic, which we now have there, which has been coupled with an opioid epidemic, and it's all now been amplified by the restrictions of COVID-19. Many are homeless and come to us in a variety of ways, either through a referral by a family doctor, or they've been incarcerated at the Kenora jail, or they're affiliated with an outreach program with a family health team that has developed a strategy to try and assist homeless individuals in Kenora and the surrounding areas.
That sounds pretty devastating. I mean, how often do you find clients that are able to overcome what the system has done to them, as you've just described?
Well, it's difficult. It's gritty work. Many of the individuals have fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, which impacts on their capacity to learn. Many have been traumatized and self-medicate with drugs and alcohol. We attempt to support people one individual at a time, recognizing that each statistic is an individual. And when we have a success, which we measure over years, after first gaining trust with them, we celebrate that. So statistically, I honestly don't know. There are many, many individuals who very sadly and tragically take their lives. There isn't a formal mechanism really to statistically judge the outcomes of what we do, but we forge ahead and try and support each individual as they come to us.
We heard from a guest before the break about the current situation in Kenora, especially with the homelessness situation there. I mean, what do you make of that current situation? It sounds like they're trying to squeeze out homeless people.
It's very difficult. Kenora is actually my biological father's hometown. I have extended family there, and it is a wonderful town in many ways, but there is a great deal of racial tension at the present time. Many of the homeless individuals live literally in a tent city and the surrounding areas. Many do access a shelter, which is available, and a number of other community-based agencies to try and provide their basic needs, but it's really a tough go. Many, unfortunately, are on the streets in downtown. Unfortunately, some of the business operators there are unhappy with the fact that somebody who may not have had a shower for a week now has a personal hygiene difficulty or is perceived to be at risk of engaging in crime. So it is a very delicate and a really challenging situation right now from a racial perspective.
I mean, is it too broad of a characterization to say that the whole city has something against homeless people?
Yeah, I would say that's too strong. And what I'd like to emphasize is that there has been a number of remarkable initiatives developed at a grassroots level in response to the distress that's sort of palpable and observable as you walk along Main Street in Kenora. One particular group, Compassionate Kenora, is a grassroots initiative, a nonprofit organization. They have created a space of safety for individuals on Main Street through a storefront. Two nurses that I am well acquainted with and a family physician who is very skilled in harm reduction principles provide primary care without the need for an appointment. There are places for showers, there's food available, and there's a lot of hope.
That organization you mentioned, of course, we featured it quite a bit in before our break, Compassionate Kenora, and it's been helping people who've been evicted for quite some time. But, I'm sorry, it's being evicted itself and will find itself homeless in 30 days in January. What's the next steps for that center?
Well, I think the primary organizers are very committed to principles that they passionately believe in, and they will land on their feet. There are a number of organizations that are partnering together. The hospital, there are housing initiatives. There's an agency called Kenora Chiefs Advisory. There is a local Canadian Mental Health Association and a detox. And attempts are being made right now to partner together. And it's my belief and my hope that Compassionate Kenora will find space to continue and hopefully expand the supports that they're currently providing to the people most in need in Northwestern Ontario.
All these organizations you just listed, they're obviously trying to push for more harm reduction. Is it working, or does more need to be done?
Yeah, so harm reduction is an alternative to immediate abstinence in the context of the lives of individuals who use substances. We recognize fairly clearly that the vast majority of people using non-prescribed substances in Kenora and in the world have histories of trauma, and they're self-medicating. And that's the perspective that we take. And we attempt to gain trust, and we remain transparent. And we don't judge what we do by the outcomes. We just hold space for people. We let them know that there is a choice besides abstinence, and harm reduction is that. So we reduce stigma. We provide harm-reducing things, such as the needle exchange program, the use of naloxone to reverse opioid overdoses. We attempt to, one at a time, prevent people from dying and walk with them until ultimately they are willing or interested in going to a treatment center or working with an addiction counselor. And again, the goal is ultimately abstinence from the drugs that are causing so much harm in their lives. And there's a misconception about that. Harm reduction, we hope, leads eventually to abstinence, but we do it at a pace that the individuals we're supporting are comfortable with. We don't dictate to them what they should do in their lives.
As you mentioned earlier on in our conversation, you have deep ties to Kenora, but you don't actually live there. So why are you treating clients there? And you've been doing it for many years. Why is that?
Well, I was a family physician prior to my training in psychiatry. I became a psychiatrist in 1993. The Kenora Association for Community Living, who support many individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, autism spectrum disorders, and intellectual disabilities, recognize that the lifetime likelihood of having a psychiatric illness in that context is in the order of 70 to 80%. So one of the directors there, Diane Pelche, who's still there and is a very close friend of mine, invited me to the town, and they created a intensive case management program which supported individuals with primary psychiatric illnesses, whether or not they had an intellectual disability. And over the years, we've developed a lot of different initiatives. We have both a district and regional focus. And in the last 3 to 5 years, we've had to shift because the demographic of who we support has changed. We're now seeing people who have survived the Ontario child welfare system, but they have been traumatized and they are self-medicating, and a harm reduction approach is the one that we feel is most humane and most compassionate.
Dr. King, once again, thank you for taking some time out of your day to appear on Nation to Nation.
My pleasure, my honor. Thank you so much for having me.
After a short break, we look ahead to next week as we keep the spotlight on child welfare. Welcome back. That's all the time we have for tonight. Next week, we continue to focus on the damages caused by the child welfare system. We take a closer look at the internal death report of Sasha Raven Bobb. She was only 12 when she took her own life 6 years ago. We'll examine that report with the help of Dr. Kim Snow. She's an associate professor of children's mental health at Ryerson University, and someone we had on Nation to Nation just over a year ago. And if you missed any part of tonight's show or a previous one, you can check out our podcasts. Go to aptnnews.ca/podcast. I'm Todd Lamirande. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.